Hello, everyone. We're going to be talking about Henri Matisse today. Let me get over to the slide. And this is part two. And what I want to talk about here is these innovations that Matisse gave us. And then is it new and improved? Does it matter? And is our experience, our visual experience, enhanced? And I want to say it is, but let's just talk about that. So, Um, again, like the Armory show that we talked about that went to Chicago and they burned his work in effigy. And his life was not without these constant critics. And some of the criticism we'd hear from Matisse is he's a wonderful draftsman, yet his form is like goose flesh. His tongue is in his cheek, his hand is in his pocket, that he was painting just to get money and, didn't believe in what he was making really. Wasn't a sincere effort. Indeed, it is unbelievable that sane men can justify these on any possible grounds, talking about looking at his work. And somebody said he's cracked, that's all a simple loony. So these would have been criticisms that you would read in the newspaper, in Paris, soon after a show would open. And, kind of like, well, not too different than today in social media. Just, I'm sure that didn't make him feel good, but, on he went with a good fight. And again, Matisse, this woman with the hat, the criticism it would receive, he said, you know, that's not a portrait. That's not a woman. That's a painting. So I like to think in those terms. But again, a lot of criticism, and it's like if you're going to be pioneering, you're gonna, there's going to be some rough stuff along the way. But let's get into the good stuff. Color. I think there's nobody that knows color like Matisse. And Picasso even said, the sensibilities, his color sensibilities are well beyond my skill level. And when he started doing the fob work, at kind of his first separation from the way he was painting like everybody else, he really pushed the colors in here, and quite effective. I want to say quite effective. Not too loud, but just the right tone in a sense. It's like a trumpet solo or a saxophone solo that's pretty loud, but it's still within the harmony of human acceptance, and it's just it's invigorating. And not the fairest of comparisons here, but this is a Dutch landscape from probably painted in the 1600s, and the North Sea of Dutchland, is not anywhere near the colorful land of the southern France. But again, think about it, Matisse, he's down there in the southern France, and there's this wonderful light, these wonderful colors and shapes, and it's like, man, I got to paint that, and the world would love to see this, and so he's just doing what he knows to do. And comparing to Matisse here from the Fauve period to a Poussin painted in the 1600s, you can just see how much more energetic it is, like Van Gogh. Yeah, somebody said of Matisse, he's Van Gogh without God. As Van Gogh was, from the religious family, and was with that religion was on his mind a lot of the time. Comparing this painting, Matisse on the left, to a Monet, excuse me, a Manet painting. Not sure of the date of this painting, but probably 1860-ish, and just compare how bold and expressive and colorful the Matisse is compared to the Manet. And this, the dance painting, the story here that I recently read was that, that he wanted the bluest blue, the greenest green, and this reddish orange. He wanted the truest colors, and the green's got to go with the blue. That's got to go with the warmer red here, and it's just not any blue, any green, or any red. But Matisse knew how to find that perfect combination. And one of the things that happened while he was preparing this painting was near the end. He's in his studio, and the sun is going down. So he's seeing this change of light, and all of a sudden he sees the blue and he senses it's vibrating. And he was like, "Oh my, is there something wrong with the paint quality? The physical quality of the paint I used is, what's going on here? I don't understand this, and I'm not sure I like this." So one of his friends, the name escapes me, but who was a fellow artist, but had been spending years. He was more of a scientific type that he, studied the qualities of paint, from a physics standpoint, and understood kind of this, the linear aspects of the materials of painting. So he came by one day soon thereafter, and same time of day, and he saw that, and he said, "Oh, well, here's what's going on." He said, "The light's going from warm to cool, as we fade, and go from day to night." And he said, "What's going on is your eyes are fluttering, they're vibrating, they're not sure which state to be in, and it's like this critical transition time." And I don't know any more than that, but I was thinking to try to put that in context. I think about, Monet he said, "I want to paint like a bird sing, kind of dancing and vibrating." And Cezanne, it said he made the static vibrate. There's this vibrational quality to his work. And I'm thinking that because Matisse had picked these right color combinations, that it's this true blue in a sense. And if it's true, it's going to vibrate when you have this change in light. I don't know, I'm making some of that up, but it's it goes again to this. It's just not any red or orange, any blue or any green. It's the Matisse sensibility that makes it happen. So away from color, getting into the more kind of Cezanne-esque areas here of composition and form, points of view, perspective. So notice this, the happy life here. There's no perspective here. There's a little bit going back here to the horizon in the back, of course, and but, look at the size of these figures here, the size of the figures here. There's no rhyme or reason where they work in the perspective mode. Somebody should be, 3/4 of this size if you're that far from the front, etc. And it's just simply not there. Which would be, this is the Anton Mauve painting I like, that Van Gogh's uncle, that tried to teach him art for a while. But, we go off into the horizon. These triangular points to go to the vanishing point in the area, that was essential for a painting to be worthy. And, Cezanne said no, Van Gogh said no, not so much as like Cezanne, but Monet with his water lily said no, Picasso said no, and Matisse is saying no, it's not necessary. And showing you some folk art here. This is a painting from the Smithsonian Institute from Sister Gertrude Morgan. She was a New Orleans street preacher, and she would paint on the side, paint on top of cardboard, tempera paints. And notice how all these figures are very effective painting as far as, evoking emotions and feelings and sensations. But notice all the figures, they're all the same size, but they're in different spots on the painting. So, again, no perspective. Down below is Nicholas Herrera. He's an artist in Taos living today, or outside of Taos in El Rito, folk artist, and just wonderful work. There's a current exhibit here in 2024 at the wonderful Harwood Museum in New Mexico. But notice how these figures here at the front right are not, they're not in proportion here. There's no proportion that makes sense in this Herrera painting. And again, it doesn't have to be that way. And, Picasso's Guernica mural, there's really no focal point here either. So, Monet's, I just noticed this. I was going to use this as an example of, he's using all these focal points going back to this person here in white. That's where your eye is going to go first, more times than not. But look, the proportion of her, it's not in sync with these guys here. And it's not in sync with, the flower, the fruits and the breads and the blankets, etc. It's missing proportion as well. And, the Red Studio, same thing here. And somebody asked Matisse after he painted this, I don't know, years later, 2 years after, something like that. He said, "What were you thinking when you painted that?" And he said, my goodness, I don't know. And, another quote from Matisse or from, all artists, they say something to the effect, artists should have, no, never try to think, only feel. And, it's that right brain, left brain going on, we want that subconscious to come through. Matisse also said that artists should have their tongues cut out, and, when you see an artist trying to explain their painting, sometimes it's just a lot of words. And, sometimes it's just better left unsaid and just experience, which could be true of this presentation here too. But this multiple points of view that we talked about with Cezanne. So, there's no point of view, so there's multiple points of view. I mean, you're going to go here, you're going to go there. And what I want to say, instead of locking on to one point, you're letting go and you're kind of experiencing, you're feeling this sense of spaciousness. And again, this Picasso worked for many months and painted 50-something paintings, based on Las Meninas. And one of the things that's so unique with Las Meninas is it's hard to see from just this image, but in person, the where Velasquez is looking and where all the ladies in waiting, the little princess, are looking, and where the servants here in the back are looking, and where the king and queen, their eyes are. When you see the dog too, this painting, everybody is looking in a distinct different spot. They've all got their own space, their own personality, and it just comes shining through. The painting is a unified whole, but it's a unified whole of very individualistic people. And it's like you look at this painting, your eye can go onto her, your eye can go onto here. It's this experience of seeing. We don't just lock onto one thing and forget it. We want to stay there with it, stay a little bit longer and enjoy yourself. And then, I'd pointed out in the Cezanne painting, this bowl of cherries, in the way they're, the point of view, the way they're tilted, the bowl of peaches here, the plate of peaches, the jar, the table, they're all at different angles. And it's like, well, what is that about? Well, it's a fuller sense of space, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And your experience it's a little bit longer lasting. I'm not sure why that's there. But yeah, the distorted proportions, that it detracts from going to that point when things are out of proportion, which is in a sense a good thing. And just a few of other paintings of his where it's like, this table and bowl here versus the day bed back here, and this table and goldfish bowl. They look outsized to me, and everything's just off. Same thing here. Not quite as much here, but it's still, there's offness going on, And another, kind of this off stuff is, the painting he did for Moreau, kind of his final exam after 5 years. Look at the vases and the fruits and the chair here in her face. It's rounded. There's three-dimensionality to all these objects within the picture plane. Well, look at this painting done like 10 years later. Harmony in Red Dessert, it's called. And, there's no light and shadow on these fruits, no light and shadow on her face. It's this flat imagery, the typical, the chiaroscuro, as they would call it, that and the light and shadow of the form and perspective were like two essentials that a painting had to have to be good. Well, Matisse has eliminated both of them, and so you can see how flat this apple looks, and that gives you one sensation versus the one that's a little bit more realistic, in a sense. But realism is maybe this is a higher realism. Yeah, and look at that, the forms here. There's just no three-dimensionality to almost anything in this painting. The way this glass is drawn here, it has some 3D to it, but no light and shadow here on anything. And speaking of no light and shadow, we'll look at some interiors here that are very flat. And these are some words from a book I recently read, and it references two art historians here that I really don't know, but I like what they said, but it said, what I'm suggesting, of course, is the opposite of that. A lot of criticism Matisse was he was charming, decorative, and superficial, like too much ornamentation. But he was saying that Matisse, taking his inspiration from Cezanne, arrived at symbolism that is not priori. It's not logical, deductive reasoning, but it comes from the unconscious and it's transcendent. What Maeterlinck called the effective rather than the artificial symbol. So, is this more effective way? And it's like, I want to say yes. And Anna Balakian, she has observed Matisse has a much more unconscious character, or his work does, comes almost without the awareness of the artist, and instead of representing his thoughts, transcends it, survives it, furnishing thoughts for all time to come. Again, it's that don't think, feel. And from Frank Stella, abstract artist, great abstract artist, recently passed away in his 90s. He said, art offers its creators a sensation so irresistible, so desirable, so exciting, that it assumes the character of instinct, as if it was something guaranteed by genetic imprint. Again, it's this, when your instincts are on, nothing feels better. And what I'm saying is that this instinctive subconscious energy that comes forth in a Matisse painting, you're identifying with that within yourself, and that's kind of the button that's being pushed, and it's a good thing. Yeah, so again, the table painting on the left is final exam versus that, talk about going flat. And I want to say too that flat is not so flat in a sense of when we look at things in black and white, which is the value of a color, its value in relation to light or dark, to black or white. And, as you can see, this blue here, it's dark, but it's not as dark as the robe. So, it's a dark gray. And, this blue here is a light gray. And so with these color differentiations, when you do it in black and white, you can really see that there is some depth that I'm not sure. One of these figures is a little bit more in front of the other, and maybe it's I don't know. I think she's in front, but he's a lighter color. But anyway, there's depth to it, which gives it life, which gives it something that makes it relatable. Same thing here with a piano lesson. Put it in black and white. On your phone, you can take an image and you can go to the edit button and black and white it, and all of a sudden you can see, no, it's really not that flat, is it? And it's snail painting, reduce that to black and white, and you can see that there's movement here, there's depth. And Matisse he knew how to do this. And you didn't have to have elaborate form to give that sense of depth to the painting. In Picasso's Cubism work, it was a lot about that, and a lot about too these overlapping planes. Notice here in the snail, these planes overlap, and that gives it a sense of depth, which makes it a sense of life and relatability. Some Picasso painting here, it's going to black and white. And this is a very modern artist, 1950s, 1960s, Ad Reinhardt, one of the New York School abstract expressionists, one of the greater ones of the era. And just notice these overlapping planes here. And, that's a lot of modern art when it first started here in the United States with the abstract expression. That's what they were doing. And, not too dissimilar from what Matisse was doing 50 years, 60 years before. So examples of flat not being flat, but this is two sisters. So there's a lot of modeling here, as they call it. It looks relatively rounded versus this painting here that was done much later. Well, you can see this Matisse going flat in a sense. And as the critic said, it's effective. And it's a different sensation of space. And, it's like perhaps it's a better space. So this wonderful Caravaggio card sharps over here versus Cezanne card players. You can see how much flatter the Cezanne is versus the card sharps. Both wonderful paintings, but it's a whole new way of experiencing the image is kind of what's going on. It's a fuller sense of space, perhaps. This Cezanne and I believe that's a Beardstadt painting, Yosemite. And, Georges Braque that we talked about, the co-founder of Cubism with Matisse, with Picasso, he said these hard and fast rules of perspective, it's taken 4 centuries to get rid of them. And Cezanne, and after him, Picasso and myself can take a lot of credit for this. Scientific perspective is nothing but eye-fooling illusionism. It is simply a trick, a bad trick, which makes it impossible for an artist to convey a full experience of space, since it forces objects in a picture to disappear away from the beholder instead of bringing them within reach as the painting should. So that's kind of the theory here that's in play, that we're gonna give credit to Cezanne, and Matisse has carried it forward in his way, quite a bit differently than the way Picasso and Georges Braque were carrying it forward with Cubism. So simplicity, I feel like color is very unique to Matisse. It was a unique talent. And then simplicity, it's again, it's trying to get to the essence in as few words as possible. And there's a risk, as Matisse said. He said the simplest techniques free the eyes for clarity of vision. In the long run, only the simple technique is convincing for time immemorial. It is taking courage to seek simplicity. He who uses simple techniques must not be afraid to appear banal. A great simplicity by no means excludes greater abundance. Less is more. You get it to the essence in one word. It's it's that clarity of vision. It has much more power. And that's something that Matisse struggled to make happen. And again, if you get it right, it's going to be very effective. And I think Matisse was able to do that. Here we are early on with this dance, 1910. It's like, let's make this simple, guys. And, I think it works. And, here's a blue nude from 1907. And yeah, I don't know, this blue nude would have been later in his life when he was in his 70s, 60 years later. And, or no, 40 years later, let's say. But, he's simplifying the image there. And again, I've never seen some of these simple images in person, and something tells me, if you put them side by side, it might be, there's just a lot of power here. And how he simplified the window at Collier like 10 years later. He's trying stuff. Same thing with this nude later on in his life. And I put the snail up against this flowers, and I didn't know the title of the snail for a long time, and then I saw the title, and it's like, yeah, that does feel like a snail. I don't know if that's right or wrong to kind of go there with that, but I also think that if somehow this reminds me of flowers that are getting ready to, burst forth, come blossoming forth. And again, there's movement in these overlapping planes. It's like there's the overlapping planes of the flowers. And it's another near to far as opposed to that one point of perspective. So here's the mastery at work. And, I call these the tangible intangibles. It's kind of, well, that color's wonderful. Well, what's so wonderful about it? And then you start to describe it, and it loses its luster. But I want to say too that, what Matisse carried forward with his color, his simplicity, and then his Cezanne-esque, techniques, they influenced a lot of the great abstract art, modern art that's come our way since, let's say, the 1950s, or, after Matisse passed away. But Rothko, the great New York abstract artist, he said, we are for flat forms because they destroy illusion and reveal truth. So here's a Rothko here. Talk about simplicity and getting to the essence. And Rothko was asked about his work. He said, yeah, they're simple expressions of complex emotion. Just comparing the flat to the flat, it's like, there's still a lot of power there. And Richard Diebenkorn, this is a couple of his images, a little blurry, but great West Coast artist, born around 1920 and passed away early 1990s, I believe. But he loved Matisse. And if you've ever seen Diebenkorn's work, one aspect of it is it's full of just wonderful, wonderful colors. And again, it's not so much the color the one color, it's the color next to it, and to be able to arrange those and juxtaposition them, takes a lot of oomph. And Diebenkorn had that, had more art books of Matisse than anyone. Whenever there was a Matisse exhibit, and Diebenkorn became popular in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and still is today. And so this is Matisse on the right and a Diebenkorn on the left, and just showing it's like, Diebenkorn's like, I'm honoring Matisse here. Diebenkorn left, Matisse right. Diebenkorn left, Matisse right. Diebenkorn left. Was his Ocean Park series, just flat, with a few lines here to kind of give it that overlapping plane kind of, movement and energy and depth. But it didn't take much, It's that simplicity again that, Diebenkorn refined it down to the essence. And these Diebenkorns here on the left they called it Ocean Park. And the apartment complex that he lived in, or his studio, was on Ocean Park Boulevard in Santa Monica. And, if you've ever been to Southern California, and if you're there, Google, Diebenkorn's Ocean Park, and you immediately get this sense of, I am in Southern California. He got the colors just right for the area. And, it's something that, you're matching something true, which Matisse was able to do, Picasso, Cézanne, Van Gogh, etc., Monet. And this is an image from Joan Mitchell. She was an abstract painter, kind of second generation of the New York school. Spent her time going back and forth between New York and Paris, owned property near Giverny, where Monet painted his garden all the time. But I just thought, she was very colorful in her work, and these overlapping planes, very Matisse. And she loved, I've used her in the Monet presentation, how, she picked up her colors are very similar to a lot of the Monet paintings of the water lilies in his garden. And this is a painting on the left here by Amy Selman. She's a living artist today, very abstract, very wonderful painter. And again, it's these colorful overlapping layers that, Matisse said, okay, these are good. It's a little bit of a stretch here, but paintings on the left are Cy Twombly, who passed away about 10 years ago. Wonderful, very abstract, kind of minimalist artist. And but this is this series, the Bacchus series. And Bacchus was the god of wine and harvest and even debauchery. And let's see, Titian did a Bacchus painting, and Velasquez did a Bacchus painting. And I think everybody has a Bacchus painting, that's a Renaissance painter painting this god of wine and, having a good time, etc., in the harvest. And, talking about simplicity. Well, the movement of all these lines reminds me of the movement here in the Matisse painting, and it's a happy life in a sense. And, if you're talking about debauchery and wine, this red against this beige here, it so fits the energy of the subject matter, and how he, cuts it down to the essence, just like Matisse. And, I've shown this video before, or this slide before, of the Milky Way stars here, and this Jackson Pollock on the left. Equalization paintings, they call it. Everything's equal, no focal point, like Monet's water lilies. And, the way that Matisse arranges these cutouts that he did later in life, I just, they remind me of something that Pollock, was doing as well. And that, Monet, here's water lily painting on the left, kind of that same, no focal point, but still there's an incredible amount of energy there. You don't need that point to go to feel this fuller sense of space, to feel this kind of letting go and being part of affinity, being a part of a kind of a bigger picture. Another influence here is on Ellsworth Kelly, who passed away 10 years ago, I believe. Everything's 10 years ago, But this is the Kelly Chapel. I think it's called a chapel, but it's on the campus of the University of Texas in Austin at the Blanton Museum, which is a wonderful museum, well-funded museum, wonderful art there. On occasion, they have some great exhibits. But this is the Kelly room, that Kelly was instrumental in, having this constructed before he passed away in his final years. But it reminds me a lot of what Matisse had done at the chapel in Vence that we talked about. The way this, look at the way the light hits the floor here. Kelly was very aware of Matisse. And I don't know, I just think it's pretty cool. And then we talked about Matisse had spent 4 years of his life there at the final years designing this chapel, worked very hard on it. And after it was installed, the bishop, I'm not sure my Catholic hierarchies, but it was kind of like the head guy of that region. He said at the dedication, he said, the human author, which would have been Matisse, of all that we see here is a man of genius who all his life worked, searched, strained himself in a long, bitter struggle to draw near the truth and the light. And that, describes Matisse. And, again, Matisse, he worked hard, as they say, and he wasn't just full of, certainty about what he did. He struggled. He started painting. He worked. And, it never come out. And then finally it would come. There's a lot of, letters that he's written about, how hard it is, what he's trying to do. And I didn't want to put them in. They sound kind of like self-pity, but they're really not. It's just, it ain't easy what he was doing. And this is one of his final paintings. He was 80 years old, I believe, when he painted this. This is a large red interior. And I just, there it is in scale, along with thinking the red room that he had painted some, I don't know, 30, 45 years before, but, the man still got it. And let's compare Matisse to these four other greats that we've been talking about. And so Monet, this great painting by Monet on the left, and then this is a cropped area, which is not really the fairest comparison, but what I'm showing is this aggressive brushwork, very colorful. And, that's kind of what Monet was doing. But with his Faubus work, he took it up a notch. And then, Monet here, the party on the Seine. And, here's a party somewhere in a field in France. And it's just the different ways that Matisse is portraying pretty much the same kind of energy. And here it's like, I think these are more alike than not. It's the Impression Sunrise, the iconic painting of Monet, and just this soft sensualness that's there. And, just showing how both of these men, the sensitivity and talent that they had is just, it's pretty amazing. And it's expansive, it's a wonderful feeling. And I don't think you grab on to anything. It's more like you let go and just kind of take a deep breath, and it just makes things better. And again, not the best comparison here, because I know this painting of Monet on the left, these poppies really they pop out very red. But, again, look at how the different kind of energeticness of a Matisse painting versus Monet. And Matisse born 1869, Monet born in 1839. So there's like 30 years difference. It's another generation. It's time for Matisse's generation to do their thing. And a Matisse Faub painting here on the right versus this was some of the brushwork from a cropped area of a Monet painting of one of his water lilies. A lot of similarities there. And then Van Gogh. I found this one. I was shocked when I put these two up together. I was like, okay, let's compare Matisse to Van Gogh. And I was going through my slides and I thought, okay, put these two self-portraits together. And it's like, Matisse was like kind of a gentle old soul. And, critics would say that, they see his work was so revolutionary, and they'd set up an interview and they'd go talk to him, and they'd be like, they're expecting, this crazy, really out there, lunatic. And, but what they found was this kind of gentle soul. And as, if you go interview Van Gogh, you'd be like, whoa, it's got a lot of stuff. And, but these two paintings are both so energetic, and, maybe it's that artist energy that's just dying to come out. I think that's a good comparison of a Van Gogh interior and a Matisse interior, very different with Matisse and the flatness to it, but there's still a lot of similar energies in there. Same thing to be said with the bedroom in Arles. And I just threw this one in there, this black cat, just the black and the red. I don't know, the strong contrasted colors, which I see in Van Gogh a lot. And I thought that matches up pretty good. A lot of similarities. And then, it's like very flat, but not flat, but there's something that's, they're picking up on the same thing. And then Cezanne. So Madame Cezanne on the left and Madame Matisse on the right. You can see, Cezanne would have been considered, the radical new painter, and look at how Matisse is doing it. And again, it's like 30 years difference in their age. Matisse taking it to his level, I guess. And almost the opposite here with, the radicalness of the way these items in Cezanne's still life are portrayed versus the traditional way that Matisse is portrayed his. Same kind of sensual energy there. And this flatness of Cezanne's card players, it's like Matisse is picking up on that. Or, maybe he's not picking up on it. He's just got that same sensibility, that artist sensibility that Matisse has, that genetic imprint, perhaps. And then Picasso. Okay, so, Matisse tried some Picasso stuff and does a great job of it. But, that Picasso's going to be a little bit different, to put it mildly, than Matisse in a lot of ways. But then there's a lot of paintings where there's similarities. But just showing you how different Picasso is in a sense than Matisse. But then something that I want to show something that feels like it's very similar. That both of these paintings have a flatness to it. And, they're both very abstract in their own way. That Picasso has distorted these forms. Well, Matisse has distorted this form. The figure of this man, there's no way his neck and, his torso and everything are that way. And the same thing with the woman, there's no way, when you go outside. So they're both distorting objects within the painting. And, it's quite effective. Artist in his model, Picasso on the left, Matisse on the right. You can see how the two have a different energy, but at the same time, it's like there are distortions in both paintings which make them effective. So they're just doing it in their own way. Of course, Picasso was, quite a bit more aggressive, let's say, than Matisse, 9 times out of 10, but, kind of move on past that. And they're kind of in that same kind of wonderful zone with both. And a critic said of, comparing Picasso and Matisse, I like this one. He said, the Matisse figure, it's relaxed. There's a sense of pleasure, empathy, classic beauty, and serenity. Picasso figure, on the other hand, there's tension, aggression, deformation, dysregulating. There's drama, tragedy, and fear. And just a little bit of cultural difference here, the kind of the French hedonism that we hear of, the romantic kind of thoughts that go with that culture. And then versus Picasso, he said, you forget I'm Spanish and we love sadness. And then another critic had said of the Spanish artists that, throughout history, the Spanish people have given us, some of the most vivid and violent contrast. So, there's that to consider, but, there's definitely a difference in the two, the way they paint. But there's also these similarities. And speaking of similarities, so, Picasso in 1907, he paints this Mademoiselle d'Avignon. And he had seen Matisse's Happy Life. And he said to Matisse that it's bolder and more advanced than anything I've ever seen. And the Blue Nude at the same time, was getting attention, was getting traction. So both these two Matisse paintings were, where you had this distorted figure up here. You had this, unusual perspectives going on here, compositions, etc. And the way the figures, the form to the figure, the light and shadows, just very different. So Picasso sees this. Story is And he's like seeing Matisse is getting attention. Picasso knows he's one of the most talented people ever in the world of painting. And he's like, it prompted him to go to work on the Mademoiselle d'Avignon. And, which they say is one of the really first Cubist paintings. And, Picasso didn't take it lightly. It said that there's 16 sketchbooks and over 1,000 sketches of working his way toward completing that painting. So, hats off to Matisse. And another influence of Matisse, giving Picasso some motivation. And this is a Picasso painting on the left. I forget when he painted this, but it was later in his life, and he was living in the south of France. And, this is an interior of the south of France, and it looks kind of very ornamental and frilly and, like a Matisse in a sense. And it's like, this is not the way Picasso really usually painted, but he's borrowing a page from Matisse's book. And this, let's see, the Harmony in Red, which is painted like 1910. This Picasso painting was painted 30 or 40 years later than that. So again, Picasso likes Matisse. And there's been 2 exhibits where they put Matisse and Picasso side by side. And if there's ever another one, I think that would be really an incredible exhibit to see. The first one was in the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth in the 1990s. The second one was in, I think, the early 2000s Museum of Modern Art. And there's a pretty good video, a YouTube video, is free. It's an interview. Charlie Rose is the interviewer, and the curator of the Museum of Modern Art that's done this show, and then the former curator of the museum, who was like instrumental in getting it all together. They both speak to Rose for about an hour, and it's very informative. And this was one of the examples that they put in there that this is a Matisse version of the female, and this is a Picasso version of the female. But again, it's like they paint alike, they don't paint alike. Paint alike, don't paint alike. So, and remember too, that this woman with hat, around the same time as Blue Nude and The Happy Life, was getting a lot of traction. Gertrude Stein bought this painting from Matisse, which would, that's like, Matisse, you're in now. And then soon thereafter, she said, "Hey, Picasso, will you paint my self-portrait?" So I don't know if she was playing one against the other, but I'm sure she knew how to get both of those guys' attention. But, an example of one versus the other. And then I told this story with the Picasso video that I did last week. But this Harlequin painting on the left, Matisse had said to Picasso, "I think it's the best painting you've ever done." And Matisse earlier had done this interior with goldfish on the right, and he was basically trying his hand at Cubism. And, he would like keeping up with Picasso. He said, "Okay, I want to understand that." And Picasso supposedly saw this painting, the interior with goldfish, and said, "All right, Matisse is getting good with this Cubist stuff. I got to do something better." So it came up with this. But kind of to make it not as severe, in competition is going on. But notice in the Picasso painting, there's this is an easel. This is the artist, and this is the palette, and that's the painting on the easel, basically. And notice there's a palette here in the Picasso and a palette here in the Cézanne. In the Matisse. And it's hard to see, but that is a thumb coming through the palette. And both of these painters, you can see the similarities in this Picasso of this Cézanne painting. And look at there. There's the thumb coming through the palette. There's the thumb coming through the palette. So they're both kind of, honoring each other, but at the same time, they know it's Picasso called Cézanne the father of us all. And again, I'd looked at this self-portrait here on the left of Matisse for a long time, and I never looked really here at the palette. But look at this oversized thumb down here. So, and there's Matisse of Cézanne with his oversized thumb there. Guys had senses of humor. And another, that Picasso was motivated by Matisse. I want to say that, Picasso's early figures, a lot of them, once he started the Cubism, they were very angular. And, as he was getting further away from tradition, geometrical kind of shapes, planes overlapping planes. And then he started surrounding his forms more like Matisse. So color, big thing for Matisse. It helps to see it compared to another painting, helps to see it in person. There's just nobody that could get a color like Matisse. And that's simplicity. It takes courage and by no means excludes abundance. And that's seeking a grace not yet discovered. I love that statement. And as the bishop said, he worked hard to try to get there. And then a couple of great books on Matisse, The Matisse on Art by Jack Flam. It's several essays from Matisse. Matisse was very articulate when it came to talking about his process and what he thought about art. It's a wonderful read. And then but The Man and His Art by Jack Flam. Jack Flam would have been the #1 biographer of Matisse, and he's good to read. But this book, it's pretty good. It's from 1869 from when he was born to 1918. So, and I'm thinking about 1918 is when he moved to Nice and lived there pretty much the rest of his life. But it's a good read. And if you like the Fauvism period of Matisse, this says this. The book on the left is a catalog from a 1990s exhibit at MoMA that featured the Fauvist artists, Derain and Flamick and Matisse. And then a more recent exhibit this year in the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. It was Maurice Flamick, Andre Derain, and Matisse's paintings up. And this is a great book. It's not that cheap, but it's got some great images in there. And then another book by Flam comparing Matisse and Picasso is quite informative. And then, as I mentioned, Richard Diebenkorn was a huge fan of Matisse's. And there was an exhibit not too long ago where they had Matisse's and Diebenkorn to travel the country showing the similarities between the two. It's quite wonderful. And then lastly, this book by Alfred Barr, who was the head of the Museum of Modern Art. He knew Matisse. The book was published in like 1951, a few years before Matisse died, but it is a very thorough undertaking of Matisse's work, and would highly recommend it. And then throwing in there this little book here. It's artists that they're somewhere between 3 and 10 years old, and they copy Matisse and Monet work. It's just a little bitty book. I got it at a used bookstore. I typed into my a used book online. I just typed in Matisse, and this came up, and it looks like it was a library book, and it cost like $3, but it's like $20 to ship it. But go to a used book site and just type in Matisse, and you'll be amazed sometimes at what you can find. And then lastly, I want to point out Robert De Niro Sr. here. So father of actor Robert De Niro Jr. He was an active artist on the New York scene in the 1950s, but I just love his work. It's very Matisse, very expressive, very colorful, and not very complicated. And just Matisse on the left, De Niro on the right. And so if you like Matisse, especially that Fauve period, check out Robert De Niro Sr. And then final thing. So a lot of critics, it's kind of standard knowledge that you say that the 2 greatest artists of the 20th century were Picasso and Matisse. And they say that Picasso left us with somewhere between 20 and 150,000 pieces of art. And, I guess each little sketch counts, but I don't know how much work that Matisse left with us. But the point being here is these guys reinvented themselves over and over and over. They would do one thing, they'd take one concept and they'd run with it and they'd make it good. Then they'd take another concept. They constantly kept trying to stay, as Picasso said, one head of the zeitgeist. And, they didn't rest on their laurels. They never stopped. Cezanne never stopped. Van Gogh never stopped. But the body of work and the diversity of their bodies of work, but sculptures, etchings, book illustrations, you name it, just besides painting, they did it all, and they all did it well. And I believe it was Jack Flam at the conclusion of one of his books. It's like, okay, let's take for granted that these are the two greatest artists of the 20th century. Name me a third. And so far I can't. And you can try, but I think whatever you run into is like, well, there's great work, but they only did this one body of work. They didn't do several. So anyway, found that very interesting. Thank you very much. That is the end of part two. Andre Matisse, a wonderful artist. Thank you.